Snow still drifted down in delicate crystals when I felt the shovel, heavy with earth, sliding over my body, burying me alive. My name is Patricia Walker, a former gardening instructor from Cedar Grove, and on that bitter January morning, my 5 children, Samuel, Helena, Marcus, Beatrice, and Lucas, dragged me to an isolated cabin in the woods and left me there, packing handful after handful of dirt over me as if I were nothing more than refuse. If you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now to follow this journey of resilience. My heart froze along with the wind whistling through the gaps in the pine door. I felt every fiber in my chest shudder in silent despair. Why are they doing this to me? I wondered, struggling to move an arm that wouldn't budge. My stomach knotted at the sharp smell of wet soil and rotting wood mixed with the cold ash of an extinguished fireplace. Summoning one last burst of strength, I slipped my hand beneath a loose floorboard and discovered an old hunting knife, my father's heirloom. I gripped it with trembling fingers and, driven by a flicker of hope, sliced through the wooden support, blowing away the soot from the grooves. The board creaked loudly, the sound echoing like a scream trapped in the cabin's throat. In that instant, a low whisper cut through the silence. "Are we really not coming back, Samuel?" It was Helena's steady voice. My body shook, but the knife gave me courage. I managed to push aside the board, and through the narrow gap I'd created, all I saw were twisted trees and a slate-gray sky. As I hauled myself out of the cabin, the wind bit at my exposed skin. Then a gentle voice pierced the cold. "Grandma Patricia!" I looked up to see Anna, my teenage neighbor, sprinting toward me with a flashlight in one hand and a thick blanket draped over her arm. Her teary eyes shone with relief and indignation. She wrapped me in a fierce hug and, voice trembling, said, "I don't care what they said. I came to save you." With tears streaming down my face, I tucked the knife into my pocket and, between sobs, vowed that this would be only the first night in my quest for freedom and dignity. If this story touches your heart, please hit like and share so more women know. We are never alone. It took me a few minutes to believe I was actually alive. Anna wrapped me in a soft wool blanket, the lavender scent mingling with the pine aroma of the cabin, and carefully helped me limp down the muddy path to her car. The engine idled low and gentle, as if it too pitied my fragility. The wheels sank into the damp earth, and I could hear the muffled squelch of mud tearing away from the tires. Inside the car, my hands shook, not just from the cold, but from the burning rage in my chest. I closed my eyes and replayed, in searing flashes, the impassive faces of Samuel, Helena, Marcus, Beatrice, and Lucas as they shoved me into that cabin like old furniture to be discarded. A drop of fear slid down the back of my neck, but transformed into steel determination. They will pay for this. Anna drove in silence through Cedar Grove's snow-blanketed streets. The low houses, their windows glowing with warm yellow light, felt like another world, cozy, safe, filled with distant laughter. Outside, the wind rattled bare branches and made the trees groan, as though whispering ancient secrets. Each bump of the car reminded me how fragile the body can be, and yet how the wounded soul can scream even louder. When we arrived at Anna's home, the welcoming crackle of the fireplace greeted us. The popping logs promised safety, and the scent of hot chocolate and cinnamon wafted up to my face, offering unexpected comfort. I sank onto a bench by the hearth, cocooned in my blanket, while Anna prepared a teapot. "You're safe now, Grandma Patricia," she said, her voice wavering. Her brown eyes glowed like embers of kindness. I cradled the mug, letting its warmth seep into my cold hands. I took a slow sip, savoring the sweetness that soothed my still tight stomach. "Thank you, sweetheart. I don't know how I can ever repay you." My voice came out weak but steady. Anna smiled and shook her head. "Don't worry about repayment," she murmured. "First, we have to tell the sheriff what they did. This can't go unpunished." I widened my eyes, the cup trembling in my grip. "Do you really think he'll listen?" I hesitated, remembering how my children always slanted their social status in Greenwood Falls. They hated the idea that I lived alone in Cedar Grove. But at that point, whose opinion mattered when someone's life was at stake? He can't ignore something this monstrous, Anna replied, reaching across to squeeze my hand. First thing tomorrow, we'll go to the station. I'll be right there with you. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling warmth spread through my ribs. With every heartbeat, my courage grew. It's decided then, I agreed softly, praying inwardly that I wouldn't fall apart. The rest of the night passed in hushed conversation and cautious planning. Anna wrote down every detail. Dates, names, the cruel dialogue she'd captured on that homemade video Samuel recorded without my knowledge. I recounted, voice thick but clear, how they'd treated me like dead weight, how they'd trampled my self-esteem by burying me alive. Outside, the wind howled through the window cracks, and I realized that the same force blowing the snow could also blow my truth out of the shadows. As I wiped away a stubborn tear, a spark of power reignited within me. This is my chance to reclaim my dignity. Before falling asleep, I stole one last look at the dying embers in the hearth and whispered, "I will win." And with that promise, I drifted off, ready for the confrontation that awaited me at dawn. The sun had barely begun to rise when Anna and I set out for the Cedar Grove police station. The icy air slapped against my face, making my cheeks burn, but the urgency driving me kept every sense alert. The damp asphalt gleamed under the weak glow of the street lamps, and the distant rumble of a train echoed along the abandoned tracks nearby. With each step, the weight of the previous night seemed to lift, replaced by a strange blend of fear and determination. We reached the small glass door of the station, its rusted sign betraying years of service to the community. Through the fogged windows, I could just make out desks and impromptu chess matches, scenes that took me back to my days teaching gardening. Nurturing plants felt as natural as nurturing hope in wounded hearts. Sergeant Miller, a middle-aged man with sharp green eyes, greeted us. His expression was unreadable at first, but the furrow in his brow betrayed his concern. When I handed him the flash drive containing the video of my children plotting my fate, my hands trembled. The smell of old paperwork and stale coffee mingled with the tension in the narrow hallway. "Sergeant, my name is Patricia Walker," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion coursing through me. "These are the records of my forced burial. I was buried alive and left to die. I want to file a formal complaint." He tilted his head and pressed his lips together. For a moment I feared I was pleading in vain. Then he drew a deep breath and said, "Mrs. Walker, this is extremely serious. I'll open an incident report and initiate an investigation right away." Relief so powerful coursed through me that my legs nearly gave out. Anna gripped my arm, and I managed a shaky smile even as my heart pounded. Sergeant Miller's pen scratched firmly across the paper, recording each name: Samuel Wallace, Helena Wallace, Marcus Wallace, Beatrice Wallace, and Lucas Wallace, and the precise location of the crime, the old cabin on Pine Road. As I signed the document, I noticed other victims waiting in line, people with weary eyes, each carrying their own story of injustice. In that moment, I realized my pain resonated beyond my own life. Every word I spoke could help not only me, but everyone who had ever felt discarded. When I finished, Sergeant Miller ran a finger along the pen's shaft and murmured, "We'll need to take your sworn statement at the clerk's office. I'll assign an investigator to follow the case closely. You'll have protection and access to counseling, if you wish." I nodded gratefully. Outside, the wind stirred dry leaves in the little garden before the station, as if a chorus of voices were praising justice in action. We stepped out and walked back to the car, where the first stirrings of hope stirred in my chest. On the drive home, I replayed the previous night's horrors again and again, my frail body being shoved, the soil pressing in, the unbearable silence broken only by the wind's creak. But I also remembered the warmth of the soup, Anna's genuine embrace, and the sergeant's steady resolve when he listened without judgment. Each memory strengthened my conviction. This story had to be heard to the very end. Arriving home, still trembling, I found solace in the chamomile tea I'd prepared. Its steam curled in gentle spirals, carried by a soft breeze drifting through the half-open window. The colorful cups hanging in the cupboard almost seemed to smile at me, as if to say, "You endured." I sat at the table, eyeing the flash drive resting beside Anna's notepad. My heart swirled with anger, fear, but also gratitude and strength. Closing my eyes, I let out a sigh and declared aloud, "I will no longer allow myself to be treated like disposable furniture." And with that, I ended the day certain that each step forward would bring me closer to justice and the restoration of my dignity. The next morning, I woke to the crisp sound of leaves being swept by Anna's broom on the terrace. The timid sun painted the garden in golden hues, but my chest still fluttered like a trapped bird. I remembered that Samuel and the others had received that official summons, the formal citation to testify, and a shiver ran down my spine. Every phone vibration made my heart leap, anticipating news about the investigation. As I descended the wooden stairs, the cold floorboards bit at my feet. In the entry hall, the radio broadcast a news bulletin. "The Wallace family is under investigation for elder abandonment. Witnesses reveal shocking video." I froze on the step, leaning against the wall as the announcer's voice echoed. The aroma of fresh coffee and just-baked whole-grain bread filled the air, but I barely noticed the cup waiting on the table. Those words danced in my mind, signaling the slow march of justice. Anna waited for me in the kitchen, her expression gentle. Her hands, busy stirring the coffee, soothed my nerves. "Have they hired a lawyer yet?" I asked, voice trembling. She lifted her chin slightly, closed her eyes, and murmured, "Not yet. We'll take it slow, but stay firm." A ray of sunlight pierced the window, illuminating her face, and I saw that same calm reflection in her brown eyes that had comforted me on the darkest night of my life. Between sips of coffee, we reviewed our next steps. We would meet with Detective Costa in his office. His suite was in a red brick building near City Hall, and word was he was strict but fair. When we stepped outside, the autumn breeze chilled me to the bone. I pulled my wool coat tighter and tucked my scarf in place, reminded that every act of care was proof I was not, and would never be, alone. Detective Costa's office smelled of aged leather and old paperwork. The door's creak as it opened felt both like an invitation and a challenge. He looked up, a medium-built man with neatly trimmed gray hair and arched eyebrows, and offered a knowing smile before speaking. "Mrs. Walker, thank you for coming so early. I've reviewed the video and spoken with Sergeant Miller. Your testimony will be crucial." My pen tapping against the notepad echoed in the quiet room. I inhaled deeply, gathering my composure. "I'm ready to help in any way I can," I replied, feeling my cheeks warm. Each word was clear and deliberate as he jotted details on a form with a pen that clicked softly. He then laid out the timeline: witness interviews, on-site forensics, preliminary hearings. His words were like precise musical notes, orchestrating the process of justice. My throat tightened when he mentioned my children could face charges of criminal neglect, punishable by imprisonment under state law. I pictured Samuel, Helena, Marcus, Beatrice, and Lucas, their arrogant faces now threatened by the consequences of their actions. Leaving his office, the long carpeted corridor muffled our steps. Outside, the wind felt gentler, as if congratulating every stride toward restored dignity. Standing by Anna's car, I managed a small smile, not from triumph, but in recognition of how this journey was transforming me. Tears slipped down my cheeks, not from pain, but relief and a renewed will to live fully. On the drive home, I let my mind wander back to my early years in Cedar Grove, teaching children to plant sunflowers and stressing the importance of strong roots. Today, I felt like that sunflower, bent by the storm, yet still turning toward the light. I gripped the steering wheel more firmly and reached back for my purse. Inside lay my father's heirloom knife, the flash drive with the evidence, and above all, the determination of someone who refuses to be buried, literally and figuratively. At home, the sweet rose scent from the cupboard welcomed me. I sat at my desk, organizing papers, reviewing every date, every name, every captured breath on that recording. Every detail mattered. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I reopened them, I saw in the mirror's reflection the woman emerging, not just a victim, but a survivor with more than enough strength to rebuild her own story. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Detective Costa. My heart raced when I heard his deep voice on the other end. "Mrs. Walker, we have a new development. I need you to come to the office immediately." The sun was already setting, streaking the clouds with long orange reflections. I pulled on a heavy coat, wrapped my scarf around my neck, and felt a strange knot in my stomach. Not just the sharp Cedar Grove wind, but the sense that something decisive was about to happen. On the way, the breeze whipped the flags in front of City Hall and shook dry leaves from the trees, as though announcing a turning point. When I arrived at Costa's office, I found him standing with Anna, holding 2 documents. His eyes gleamed with a mix of gravity and relief. "We've uncovered a late will," he began, handing me the yellowed pages. "It was drafted 3 months ago, before any of this began. There's no other codicil. Your Maple Street property is registered solely in your name, with a clause granting you a life estate. Your 5 children have no authority to sell it without your explicit signature." My body trembled, and a lump formed in my throat. I could hardly believe it. This was the hidden motive behind their betrayal. Samuel had lied about the house being a shared asset. He orchestrated my burial to force my silence and seize Cedar Grove's most valuable property. "So, they lied about ownership?" I whispered, the papers slipping from my fingers. "Yes," Costa confirmed. "This makes their situation even more serious. Beyond elder abandonment, we now have evidence of fraud and document forgery. Marcus and Helena were caught altering records at the courthouse." Anna squeezed my hand gently. "Pat, this gives us even more leverage," she said. Fighting back tears, I felt a blaze of determination ignite in my chest. I left with the will folded in my pocket, my face throbbing. Each step back to my house seemed to echo my thoughts. They not only buried me alive, they schemed against what was rightfully mine. From the corner of my eye, I spotted a parked car broadcasting a late-night news report. A reporter was interviewing neighbors about the scandal, its ripple effect building like a storm on the horizon. At home, I sat at the kitchen table, comforted by the scent of dried herbs and crackling firewood. I opened the envelope again and reread the clause guaranteeing my life estate. In that moment, I understood that my pain had sown the seeds of truth, and that justice was the gardener of hope. I decided to act fast. I picked up the phone and called my trusted attorney, Mrs. Celeste Morrison, a woman of unwavering resolve and keen insight. When I shared the news, she exclaimed, "This changes everything. We'll file for an injunction to nullify any sale and request urgent protective measures." As I noted her instructions, my eyes landed on an old photograph in the corner. Me smiling with my children when they were little. The same faces now poised to betray me. A pang of sorrow hit me, but alongside it came a profound relief, because at last their mask was slipping. The next morning, the court scheduled a hearing to review the evidence. I walked to Anna's car with the will tucked into my bag, feeling both its weight and its liberating power. It symbolized an unexpected reversal. From a woman buried and betrayed, I was becoming the rightful heir to my own story. Inside the courtroom, tension buzzed in the air. When the judge read the will's life estate clause aloud, Samuel and his siblings turned ashen. Marcus stifled a nervous cough. Helena averted her gaze in shame, and Lucas buried his face in his hands. In that moment, I felt a surge of triumph, not vengeance, but the restoration of my dignity. As I gathered my papers afterward, reporters' cameras swung toward me. I raised a hand for silence, and voice steady yet filled with emotion, declared, "Today, I do not celebrate my children's downfall, but the truth's victory, that even when buried, it always finds a way to live on." Let my story remind every woman, never let your voice be silenced. And if you're facing injustice, know that there is hope. Subscribe and join our community of support and strength. My words still resonated as I left the courthouse. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting a faint rainbow over the stone steps. In that moment, I realized the darkest chapter had closed, but my journey of renewal was just beginning. The next morning after that landmark hearing, I awoke to the distant song of a mockingbird in the garden, an almost unreal sound after so many days of heavy silence. The air felt gently fresh, as if spring itself wanted to dry the tears of the night before. I slipped into my light coat, inhaled the earthy scent of dew on the hydrangeas, and made my way to the kitchen, where Anna was already brewing coffee in respectful silence. The soft clink of her spoon against the porcelain sounded like a metronome of hope. I had barely touched my cup when a tinge of bitterness jolted my most painful memories. The weight of the soil, the cabin's chill, Samuel's impassive gaze as he'd sentenced me to silence forever. Yet in that moment, something stirred in my heart, a signal that this story was far from over. Then the phone rang, shattering the kitchen's cozy calm. On the other end was Lucas's hesitant voice. "Mom, could we talk?" My chest tightened. Lucas, the youngest and most silent of them all, had never raised his voice throughout the entire ordeal. I set my cup down carefully and gripped the receiver with trembling fingers. "Of course, sweetheart. Where are you?" "I'm at the old family workshop on Araka Street. Please come alone. I need to tell you something important." My heart raced. His tone carried both urgency and fear. I dashed to the garage, tied my scarf, and plunged into the morning breeze. Cedar Grove streets were nearly deserted. Only a few cyclists passed by as I parked in front of the workshop's rusted gate. Inside, the sharp smell of sawdust mingled with dampness. Shafts of sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, illuminating dancing dust motes. Lucas emerged from behind an old machine, his eyes red, his voice barely contained. "Mom, I recorded everything. Not just the video of my siblings plotting to bury you, but also their conversations planning to forge the will. I've regretted it every day. I haven't slept a single night without feeling guilty." He held out a flash drive with a trembling hand. I saw my own reflection in its shiny surface, a woman marked by pain yet standing tall, ready to fight. I swallowed hard and asked, voice thick, You betrayed me, to protect them." He looked away, burdened. That was my worst mistake, but I had to choose, be complicit with them or help you. They believed no one would ever find out. I just didn't have the courage to speak up until now. I settled onto an old wooden crate, feeling the rough wood press against my coat. The silence that followed pulsed in my mind like a tribal drum. Finally, I exhaled and said, softly but firmly, "Lucas, your courage changes everything. Thank you for giving me this proof." He stepped closer and hesitantly tried to hug me. The faint scent of aged leather from his jacket mixed with the soft perfume of my scarf. In that raw moment, my defenses collapsed, and tears streamed down my face as I held his fragile shoulder. "Let's show this to Detective Costa," I concluded, wiping away my tears. "Today, your truth redeems not only me, but our entire family." We left the workshop together, clutching the flash drive like a trophy of justice. A gentle breeze whispered approval through the empty bays. In that instant, I knew the most astonishing twist was yet to come, and that I would never again feel buried. I stepped out of the workshop beside Lucas, the flash drive clutched tightly in my hand, my heart pounding so hard it felt like I couldn't catch my breath. The cold afternoon wind swept down the Aracas Valley, scattering dry leaves along the muddy path that led to the police station. Each step felt heavy, yet carried the urgency of a liberation cry I could no longer suppress. The overcast sky reflected my mood, uncertain, yet charged with hope. When we reached the red brick building, I felt the security guard's gaze on us as we climbed the entrance ramp. The scent of wax and aged paper filled the lobby, mingling with the fragrance of fresh flowers arranged by the reception desk, a striking contrast between institutional formality and the gentle pulse of life. Lucas swallowed hard, his knees trembling, and I gave his shoulder a firm, encouraging squeeze. Inside Detective Costa's office, the soft lamp glow illuminated a desk piled high with files. He greeted us with a serious yet kind expression. As Lucas handed over the flash drive, Sergeant Miller slipped in quietly, gloves in hand. The snap of latex echoed like a herald of justice about to be served. "Let's extract the recordings now," Costa said, booting up the monitor. My children's cold voices filled the room, scheming to forge signatures and silence me so they could claim my home. Samuel's pale face appeared on the screen, Marcus's calculated tone, Helena and Beatrice's silent complicity, and finally, Lucas's guilty glance, trembling his head. Every word on that video cut through me like a blade, shattering the pride I once held for those I had raised. As the evidence was copied into the case file, tears welled in my eyes, a mixture of relief at hearing the truth and sorrow at the depth of their betrayal. But above all, a flame of justice ignited within me, burning away fear and fueling my resolve. Detective Costa removed his reading glasses and moved to formalize the additional charges of fraud and forgery, alongside the abandonment count. "They had no idea you held sole ownership of the property," he said, handing me a pen to sign the new documents. In the hallway, Anna's and Sergeant Miller's respectful, supportive glances followed us like a protective cloak as we said our goodbyes. Pushing through the exit door, I inhaled deeply, the air freshened by a fine, drizzling rain. The cold drops hit my face like a reminder that even on gray days, life renews itself after the storm. Back home, I noticed every detail along the way. The wooden gates creak, the scent of wet earth in the garden, the soft patter of rain on the roof. I knew this delivery of evidence would change not only my children's fate, but my own journey toward reclaimed dignity. As I approached the door, I let out a relieved sigh and smiled, aware that, from this moment on, I would no longer be the buried mother, but the woman who planted her own freedom. The days that followed were all about rebuilding. The gentle spring rain washed the scars from my soul and renewed the green of my hydrangeas, which now bloomed with uncommon vigor. Seated on the porch of my new home, purchased with the funds I reclaimed through justice, I gazed across the Cedar Grove skyline, aware that every drop of pain had served as fertilizer for my rebirth. Beside me, Anna put together a small herb garden, a living reminder of the days I taught children to turn barren soil into new life. She smiled when she caught me watching, and I realized how true love springs from the simplest of gestures. Sergeant Miller, now a friend and confidant, would stop by to tend the plants we donated to the precinct. His laughter carried the lightness of someone who has weathered storms and emerged stronger. I, Patricia Walker, once buried alive by my own children, have transformed my story into a seed of hope. I've learned that silent perseverance holds tremendous power. It doesn't demand fanfare, yet it takes root firmly in hearts that refuse to surrender. Each morning, I rise with gratitude and prepare a cup of chamomile tea, breathing in the soothing aroma that symbolizes my restored peace. A few moments later, I received a letter from Lucas, who decided to start anew elsewhere, seeking his own redemption. Helena and Marcus, moved by the public outcry, reached out for my help in mending the broken bonds, but I know that forgiveness takes time and must be earned through genuine action. For now, I choose to let go of my bitterness and allow my accomplishments to speak for themselves. Today, I share this story not as someone burdened by the past, but as someone wielding a trophy of dignity. Every step toward the police station, every testimony, every recording revealed buried truths, and more importantly, taught me that a woman's voice can never be silenced. If this journey has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to celebrate stories of courage and renewal. Hit like so more women know. However dark the path may seem, the light of truth and hope always finds a way to shine through. And remember, your strength, whether quiet or thunderous, is the greatest legacy you can give yourself. Never let anyone steal your voice or bury your dignity. The power of overcoming lies in your hands. Enjoyed this story? Like, share, and subscribe so we can cultivate together the strength that blooms after the storm.